There we go. There we go. But it is good to have you. One thing that we could still use some assistance on, and again, thank you for those who have already participated in helping us with the 4th of July parade float. We got that knocked out in 2 Saturdays, and so it's always a good thing to get that done. But we're still needing candy. You know, one of the real highlights of the parade for dads and for kids is all the candy that's given away along the way. And so we have had wonderful donations, and thank you if you've already done that. But if you have not had an opportunity to do that, if you could get by the office in the next couple of days with, go to Costco and buy the multi-big bag of candy, and if you would bring it to us, and you can either leave it on the table right outside of the office door, or there are boxes here in the office area, but also in the building too. So anyway, if you would help us with that, that would be wonderful to have. So make sure that we still have a little candy left by the time we get to the end of the parade. So it'll be good for us to do that. So anyway, thank you for, again, being here today. We're going to start off in Jerusalem. Again, we're doing Jesus Goes to the Home of Mary and Martha, a story that you are somewhat familiar with. But I thought we'd start with a couple of maps just to give you an idea of where we're talking about. And I'm not sure if this will point that far or not. But anyway, this is obviously a drawing of the area of the Temple Mount, crossing over the Kidron Valley into the Mount of Olives. And then on the backside of the Mount of Olives that we have here, you actually have the village of Bethany. The top of the mountain there is the village of Bethpage, as we call it, or Bethpage. And so we have that, and we begin with them. You'll see that also this leads to the road to the Jericho Road, which is the road that goes from Jerusalem to Jericho. And as we've often said, when you get to Jericho, you have to go up. You can't get to Jerusalem without going up. And so this would have been the traditional way most folks got from the northern part of the country into Jerusalem, is by coming by Jericho. So from this point, when we get to Bethany and Bethpage, you're about 16 miles downhill to go to Jerusalem with that. So Jesus is very familiar with this area. He has spent a lot of time on the Mount of Olives. And you'll see here the arrows that point to Gethsemane, the green arrow there, and the blue arrow, which is Dominus Flavit, which is the traditional site where Jesus looks over the valley. He is on the Mount of Olives. He stops and he pauses and he begins to weep. Because and that's what this is about, tears at this point. And so he is there. It's overlooking the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's looking over into the old city, as we often traditionally do with that. So we are happy to be at this point. Again, you're going to have to move it. But this is another view that gives you a little better topographical view of here, and you can see the old city of Jerusalem there, the Temple Mount that is there, again going across the Kidron Valley, the Garden of Gethsemane, and the red line there is the traditional site in which most folks would have gone from Bethany to Jerusalem or back and forth. And from here, from the Temple Mount to Bethany, is about a 2-mile walk that you have. And again, you're going uphill till you get to the top of the Mount of Olives, and then you're going back downhill as you're going to Bethany. You really can't see. There are parts of Bethany you can get to, but Bethany as a village at that point, you would not actually been able to see over the top of the Mount of Olives to be there. But today we're going to begin with our scriptures verse for this week. Again, something that is familiar to us. Now, as they went on their way, he, meaning Jesus, entered a certain village, Bethany, where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at Jesus' feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha, who was distracted by the many tasks, so she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need for only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. So I don't know if this happens in your house sometimes or in your community where the equal labor is not always done properly, as some would suspect. Those who are working hard on things would be unhappy if there's others sitting around in conversation instead of helping and participating. And so Martha, who is trying to be hospitable to Jesus, is involved with all the preparing and making sure everything is done properly. And Mary is sitting at his feet listening to what Jesus has to say. And so this creates this awkward situation of who is doing what is proper and best at this point. I'm sure Mary is trying to be hospitable to Jesus too in her own way. But it creates a little bit of awkward situation and a little bit of a challenge for Martha, who feels like she's doing all the work. I don't know if any of our young people who are here today have ever experienced that or not, where you think a sibling is not carrying their weight and doing what they're supposed to do while you're working hard on things. And I remember in my own life as a young child, we were asked to clean up our room. And so we went upstairs and so we began cleaning. Well, my brother and sister were cleaning and I was just lounging around only for my mom to come upstairs and well, this is after when the things had kind of switched. My brother and sister finally got tired of me sitting around. And so they said, okay, now you're going to do the rest and we're going to watch you. And so they sat down on the bed. And so my mom comes upstairs and I'm working hard in the room, only to see my brother and my sister sitting. And needless to say, they got in trouble. Because I was doing all the work. And ultimately, I did confess that was not the case that was there. But it did create an awkward situation in that. And that's part of what's going on here. We do know this is I looked at a number of pictures and famous drawings of this encounter of Jesus and Mary and Martha. And you see in this picture, Mary standing or sitting and listening to Jesus speak. And then Martha, who is busy around the table, preparing for the meal, looking over her shoulder as, you know, okay, why are you sitting there when we got lots of things to do? And we do know, and we remember that hospitality was exceedingly important in biblical times. In fact, it still is today in the West or the Eastern world with that. In biblical times in general, in Luke's gospel in particular, there's a great emphasis on hospitality. And so we know when we have traveled there that many times if you're in the Middle East, in that part of the world, people go out of their way to try to be helpful, and our bus drivers and our guides and everybody are just so attentive to everything that we need. And obviously, if people in particularly know you, they go out of their way to do all they can to be helpful to that. And so the focus of this particular story, or of the Gentiles in particular, is in the Gospel of Luke. It is in Luke's gospel that the focus is on the Gentiles. It's also for including them in the faith. There's a real intentionality that Luke has, that they are included, that there's positive betrayals of Gentiles, those who are non-Jewish, in the kingdom of God. And we have stories, just the one right before this, about a few stories is the Good Samaritan. And again, a Gentile who is very helpful to someone who is Jewish in the faith with that. And so the stories are actually for the inclusion of the marginalized, is a part of the story of Luke. Luke, as we've often said, is the story of the poor, the sick, and the outcast. And so all the stories that you have in Luke tend to be stories that talk about this tension between those who are included in the faith and those who are excluded in society or politically or in faith. And so basically, anybody facing a hardship of some kind is a focus in the Gospel of Luke. And so we often talk about it as the gospel for the least, the last, the lost, and the lonely. Those persons that find themselves on the outside looking in. And so we have that in our story today. Also is who's supposed to be doing what in that. But the main thing about the Gospel of Luke is that the focus is for everybody, is for anybody and everybody to understand and know about Jesus. And so as we look at hospitality at the time of Jesus, I thought it would be interesting for you to hear a little bit about what the rules of hospitality were. We talk about it's significant in the scriptures, and even in the Old Testament, we have many stories of people being hospitable in welcoming in those who are strangers, those who are travelers, whatever it might be. And so we have a number of stories that do that. But we also know that the responsibilities of the host, first of all, as you would do in your home, is to provide food and drink, to provide refreshment for those who are traveling and are there. And sometimes guests are anticipated, and sometimes guests just show up. And whether you're fully prepared or not, you do what you can for those who are there, and you make sure that they are comfortable with that. We also offer them water for their washing of their feet in the time of Jesus. Traveling as they did across dusty roads made it very unpleasant to then show at someone's home and to have all the dust there. So I'm sure there's the kind of the shaking out of our clothes as we've been walking in the dust, but also that we remove our shoes as we get home, and there is some kind of ritualistic washing of feet with that. We also provide shelter, a place for people to stay and to rest and to sleep. And even if it's not for a full night, we often give them a chance to rest. Sometimes we'll let them sit in the best chair. Your chair is a way that we do that. And so the lazy boy recliner that has the cup holders and all the stuff that you have, we let them sit in our seat that maybe no one else in the family gets to sit in very regularly, but you let your guests do that. We also provide protection as we are being hospitable to people. We provide safety and well-being at the time of Jesus. But we also try not to impose on the guest. The host should not appear miserable, is what it says in the text. Don't appear to be miserable or exclusively attentive to the guest to the point that you overwhelm them. There's this balance of welcoming them in, wanting to know all about them, trying to share stories, but also give them some space with that. Now, we also know that during this time that sometimes when guests were unexpected, you might not know the guest well. And so if you spend all your time overwhelming them with questions about where they've been and what they've done and what kind of job they have and all those kinds of things, it can be a little overwhelming. And so the guest who is there may just be there just to get a little refreshment, to get a little rest, and then ultimately get on their way. And so we are appreciative then of what the role of the host is. Then we got the guest. The guests themselves are supposed to accept hospitality graciously. Refusing offered hospitality was considered to be rude and somewhat of an insult. And so sometimes, even if you didn't want to tell your full story, you would take the opportunity to do so, just to be hospitable back to your host. They were also, as guests, supposed to offer blessings. And that was expected to be offering blessings or prayers over the host and anyone as a part of the household. And that would be those who cared for you as well as family members. You're also not supposed to harm the host or the household. Sharing food established a covenant relationship between you. So one of the reasons food is served is that it is a symbol of peace and of friendship. And so you do that as a way to establish relationships. Now, for those of us that have family or close friends or others that come to our home, that's pretty easy to do. But again, if you're accepting and expecting or you're hosting a stranger, sometimes you may not know what all of their intentions are. And so you offer the hand of fellowship and you give them an opportunity then to be in your presence, but you establish this covenant with them. But the guest also is not supposed to ask for anything in particular. You're supposed to receive graciously whatever your host provides. And so we're not to request specific things. If someone brings you something, you're not supposed to say, no, I don't want that, but I see that over there. That's really what I would like to have with that. So you accept whatever it is that is provided for you. And then you also show your gratitude. You demonstrate appreciation for your host generosity with that. So those are the beginning rules of there, but there are also some basic practices that at the time of Jesus were shown. First of all, it's a sacred obligation that you have. Not merely a social custom, but a moral and a religious duty to provide assistance to those who are in need. With that. And so you can just imagine if you're on a main thoroughfare or if you're on a main road going from the Sea of Galilee down to Jerusalem, especially at the times of Passover and in times of celebration in Jerusalem, you would have hundreds of people that are coming down there. And so by being on the road, you would also offer as best you could. And I can almost imagine a little lemonade stand or something that would be set up. We talk about providing for others as they would need with that, but to have people coming through and providing what you would want them to have with that. Again, sharing food was a covenant of peace and of friendship. And then you extend hospitality even to strangers. And I don't know, some of you have been in situations, I have been in that situation before, back in the days when cars used to break down or overheated or whatever it might be. If you especially had a car that had a few days on it, with that, sometimes your car might break down on the road somewhere, or maybe you would have a flat tire along the way. And so you need assistance of some kind. And I have walked up to the door of someone I did not know and asked for assistance before. Now, in this day and age, you don't have cars that even have even spare tires anymore because the tires are so good, they're never going to blow out, I guess, or whatever it might be. So there are situations in which we ourselves look for assistance, even to strangers with that. So you might have someone knock on your door one day that is still needing assistance. One of the things that I had an opportunity to do, as I remember back, it was in 1993, I guess it was, on one of my first trips to Israel. My archaeologist friend, Charles Page, had the opportunity for us to spend a couple of days in the Judean wilderness with some Bedouins, Bedouin shepherds. And I was able to experience hospitality as they would traditionally do it there. with that. And one of the things that Charles taught us, and it's kind of a little counterproductive to some of the rules of hospitality, but he kind of schooled all of us before we went. There was 6 of us that went to have this experience. And he said, before we get there, we kind of play a hospitality game with this. And so when you get there, you're supposed to say no to whatever offered for the first 3 times, primarily as a way of saying, no, 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 don't go to any trouble for me. It's not that you're not being hospitable, but this is the way. You would be offered something and you would say, no, 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 not this time. I'm fine. I'm good to go. Whatever it was that they offered. And then they would offer again. And you would say, no, 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 please, please. That's way too much for me. Whatever it is. And then finally, on the 3rd time, you're given permission to say, yes, thank you so much for this. And so we had this opportunity to do that. And Mama Alina it was the head of the household of this. And Phil often reminds us what names mean, but Alina means soft, delicate. And this Alina was anything but. She was obviously the matron of the family. She was large and she was in charge of all the things. And so she really kind of went overboard with this experience. And I don't know if she and Charles actually worked this thing out or not, or this is what they usually did, but it was an opportunity for us to live it out. So, but the understanding was, even with this little game we played initially, whatever we were offered, once we got past these initial stages, we were to accept whatever was given to us or provided for us graciously. And whether you wanted it or not, or whether it was something you had ever eaten before in your life, whatever it was, you were to take it graciously and you were to enjoy it and experience that and thank them for it. We also, while we were there, periodically, Charles would kind of nod to one of us and we would have a prayer and a blessing for the family that was here. And this was a large family. It was an encampment for Bedouins. And so there were a number of people that were related to each other, but we prayed for all that were there. We also promised as we were leaving that we would come back one day. We were invited to do that. They graciously, but also insistently repeated over and over. Once you have been here, you're a part of our family. And we expect that you will come back and be with us one day. Unfortunately, that didn't happen over time. I lost track of where they were and didn't really have a chance to do that. But we were also supposed to extend an invitation for them to come and visit us. And while that was something that did not happen also, it's a part of the hospitality. You're supposed to graciously offer, and we do that often with people, we meet someone and they say, we really ought to get together for lunch. We really ought to get together at some time. This was fun. Let's do this again. Sometimes, and sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't, but yet we still offer graciously what that is. So anyway, that's kind of how hospitality worked at the time and what we would do now. But we first of all begin with Martha in this story. She seems to be the one that graciously welcomes Jesus. Mary and Martha, as you know, along with her brother Lazarus, were friends of Jesus, and they lived in the village of Bethany, which again is about 2 miles from downtown Jerusalem. Mary is the one, or Martha was the one that offered hospitality and wanted everything to be perfect for Jesus and for the visit that he had. And so for that reason, she is going to go out of her way to provide this. This is a special guest for her. This is a part of being with him. And then we also know that Mary sat at the feet and heard his word. And it wasn't that Mary was lazy. I think, with this. Several commentaries talk about it. It's not that she was lazy. She did her part to prepare, probably, for the coming of Jesus. They hopefully knew he was coming, but even if they didn't, they would have gone out of their way. And then she sits with Jesus and begins to hear what he has to say. And Mary, at this point in the time, assumed a position of a follower who is listening to a rabbi. And as we know, this was a part of the culture. It was a part of the time where there are certain places and times that people would gather and listen to those who are the teachers, those who are the rabbis of the faith, and they would share what we do. Now, traditionally, the rabbi would be the one standing and other or sitting, and others would stand. A little different than what we generally do in our culture. But in this case, in this familiar relationship that they have, and probably in the comfort and the intimacy of their home, Mary actually sits at his feet. And so she is rather than assuming the role of what would traditionally be that of the women who would take care of the hospitality, she takes the place of a learner, as someone who is a follower. And so Mary's part is basically this devotion to Jesus, this relationship, this significant relationship that we see in this family with him. And she loves Jesus, and she's listening to his word with that. And so we're with that. But, we also at times need to figure out what it is that we need to be doing. And in this story, there's this tension of who is right, who's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And Martha's doing what she thinks is supposed to be done, is a host and someone who's providing hospitality. She is expecting everybody in the household to respond and do the same. Mary, who is hearing all that Jesus has to say, and even who knows, he may have invited her to sit down and to listen with that. And we get caught in this too. There's times that we say, yes, we're going to be faithful to Jesus' call upon our lives and all that we have to do, and then stuff gets in the way. We want to provide well for our families. We want to give our children every opportunity they can to grow and to experience things in their lives. And so maybe some things that we didn't have an opportunity to, or maybe things that we did, and we want to make sure they have that experience too. We want to serve the Lord. We want to be faithful, and also as well as to our neighbors. And where would this church be, and many churches be, without the Marthas of the world? Those who go about doing the things behind the scenes that need to be done, and to provide for others with that. But we're also invited to sit at the feet of Jesus. So we may be ready to accept and obey what Jesus is teaching. We may be ready to submit to the call that Jesus is placing upon our lives to be faithful followers. We're to have faith in who Jesus is and all he teaches us. We're to be true disciples of Jesus in all the ways that we can. And ultimately, we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, is what Jesus tells us. And so at times, how can we be both at the same time? How can we be a doer of the things that need to be done, but also be a faithful follower and attentive to what Jesus has called us to be and do? And we know that there are times when we just have to take the time. And that's part of what we hear Jesus saying to Martha and to Mary both at one point or another. Jesus says to her, basically, just take a moment. It's okay. Everything's going to be good. I'm taken care of well here. Just take a moment to sit down and listen and be a part. Phil reminded us on Sunday that, sometimes we can get caught in the worries of things that really means distractions with us, is what the word means in Greek, this in the scriptures, is that we get distracted by all the things around us, that our intentions are good, but ultimately we're not totally following what Jesus has called us to be and do. And so we are going to continue to be faithful followers as best we can. And so let us get to some questions related to our study. Whom do you relate to most in this story? Are you the Marys or the Marthas of the world? Or maybe at times you're one or the other. You go back and forth. Phil asked people to raise their hands if they were Marthas on Sunday, and a number of people did. But I also think there are a lot of Marys out there too that try to do that. And sometimes we find ourselves even conflicted a little bit within our own lives. When are you most able to give God your undivided attention? What is it that helps you zero in? What are the things that help you be attentive to what God is calling you to be and do? And if you would give up 2 distractions away in your life, what would they be? What are the 2 things that you need to kind of let go of? And if you can't think of 2, at least one. I think we mentioned last week, Eric, when he was here, the response we got to the committee of 100, who talked about, we asked people, what is your next step in faith? What is the next thing that you need to do at this point? Or what is God calling you to do? And then what is the conflict with that? What is it that keeps you from doing that? And over 60% of the people said time. But yet we also know that time is one of those things. We find time to do the things that we want to do. Somebody was telling me the other day that they didn't have time to do something with me, and they got an offer to go to a ball game and they decided to do that instead, which no value is placed on whether I'm more important than the Braves at that point. But it also was an interesting thing. I don't really have time to meet with you, but I have time to go to the ball game with that. It was Phil. Well, it was mostly, I got to meet Ruth yesterday, by the way, and what a gift. Thank you so much, Phil, for that. She came by the office to see all of us yesterday, and so she is alive and well, and she knows how to cry. That's we heard that with that. But anyway, what are the distractions? And then the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about the challenge of worry in our lives. Do you really worry that much? We spend a lot of time talking about worry. Is that overkill? What have you learned about worry in the last couple of weeks as we've studied and we've shared? So talk amongst yourselves around the table.